Well, good morning, everybody. This is Billy Trout with the Tennessee Department of Revenue's Taxpayer Education section. Today, I'm joined by Katie Julian in our education section as well as Ms. Christina Mason from our audit division, and Dan Vinson, our Assistant Director in Taxpayer Services. Today, we're going to be presenting information about destination-based sales tax reporting. I'll get that out in just a second there. It's kind of a mouthful, but this is a very important topic for us, and we'll explain why during the presentation here too. So we want to thank those of you that have attended today's presentation live. And if you're viewing this on video, of course, we know this will be an important resource for you in the future. So as we begin the presentation today, we ask that you check your audio settings as directed here on screen. And then please note that we will put a recorded presentation out on our website either later today or tomorrow, so that this will be available for you. Should you have any other questions about today's topic matter, we ask that you send us an email to the email address shown on your screen, or you give us a call. We are available Monday through Friday every business day from 8 to 4:30 Central Time to be able to take your calls as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce Katie, who will walk you through the presentation here, and then we'll have some commentary a little bit later from those involved in today's call. Katie, take it away. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Billy, and thanks to Christina Mason for being here with us as a subject matter expert from our audit division. A great resource actually on this topic in particular, Christina is, due to she is actually based out of state and out of one of our regional offices, so deals with this topic quite a bit, reporting out of state sales by delivery destinations. So we're happy to have you all with us. I know it's a kind of strange time, that week between Christmas and New Year's, and really appreciate you all logging in here and viewing this important information that we have. A lot of you hopefully have been with us, joining us on recent webinars that we've had, and hopefully will join us in future webinars. I'll go ahead, in case I forget to tell y'all later, we will be doing a webinar next month. Of course, it's always the last Tuesday of the month. The topic for January is TIN-TAP. We'll be discussing recent changes to TIN-TAP and tips and tricks for navigating through TIN-TAP, and as well as all the basics with filing and navigating through your TIN-TAP account, which is our electronic filing website. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and dive into our topic for today, reporting out-of-state sales by delivery destination. We will be going over some tax law, including background information, the current laws and rules, and important notices that are regarding this topic. We'll be talking specifically about sourcing sales, identifying the correct local jurisdiction, reporting sales by the delivery destination. We'll give some examples there. We will let you know about some resources that we've got, and then answer your questions when we get through this presentation portion. We'll deal with some specific questions that you all have. If you've got questions also, feel free to put them into the chat. A lot of registrants sent questions in advance, so we appreciate that. So just to give you a little bit of background about sales by destination, of course, the Supreme Court decision in South Dakota versus Wayfair was a very critical turning point with sourcing sales by destination. We'll talk about that here in a minute. The Wayfair decision occurred on June 21st of 2018 and was effective October 1st of 2019. And Tennessee requires out-of-state dealers to report sales by delivery destination as of that effective date of October 2019. What that means is physical presence is no longer required for online merchants with a substantial nexus. Sales shipped to or delivered to Tennessee customers from outside the state are taxed at the state rate and the applicable local rate, and they are reported by jurisdiction on the Schedule E of the Tennessee sales tax return. So this slide here puts in a nutshell everything that's happened over the last few years with regards to out-of-state sourcing and sales thresholds. A lot has happened, lots of shifting, and every couple of years here the laws kind of hone in on dealing with this situation. And in a nutshell here, as I mentioned, 2018 Wayfair versus South Dakota stated that a state can mandate that businesses without a physical presence in a state can collect and remit sales tax on transactions in that state. Immediately, Tennessee legislature Public Chapter 491 requires out-of-state dealers to collect and report local sales tax based on the local jurisdiction where the sale is shipped or delivered. This public chapter also repeals the uniform local rate option that was previously available. I will say that at that point, we did decide administratively to give a grace period for out-of-state businesses that deal with this, and kind of allow them to still, even though the law passed said that they had to report based on delivery, the local jurisdiction rate, we had a grace period there. We started a grace period there. So in 2020, Public Chapter 759 lowered that sales threshold that was set in 2019, which in 2019 it was 500,000 was the threshold that out-of-state dealers needed to reach. And in 2020, Public Chapter 759 lowered that to 100,000, of course, for periods prior to that, so between October of 19 and October of 2020. Retail dealers could still use the $500,000 threshold, but this is when things changed a little bit and are still at that we're still at that $100,000 threshold for out-of-state dealers with sales into Tennessee. At that point also, we continued the grace period for opting out of sourcing by delivery destination. You still had that option in our system to use the uniform local rate. So 2021, where we just for a few more days are currently continued grace period for opting out of sourcing by delivery destination. No new laws passed this year regarding sourcing or sales thresholds. Again, like I said, we're still at that $100,000 threshold, still in the grace period, but one of the main reasons why we are having this webinar today is that things will be changing in the near future. In 2022, we will be disabling the option to opt out of the local rate, flat local rate, and all out-of-state dealers who meet the threshold will have to will have to file based on the actual local jurisdiction, based on the exact address that was sold to, and we will get into that in detail. So that's really the main reason why we are here today, is to put the word out there that this opt-out function is no longer going to be an option, and we're going to let y'all know exactly what you need to do to comply with the law and source by destination delivery. So what does this mean to taxpayers? Just to recap what we just discussed, currently dealers with no physical presence in Tennessee who make $100,000 or more in sales to Tennessee customers must register to collect sales tax. And this can be done through our 10-tap system. Each sale must be reported on Schedule E using the applicable local tax rate based upon the shipped to or delivered to address of the customer. And how to apply this threshold: dealers must include all retail sales that occurred during the previous 12 months, regardless of where they are in the year. And that's so $100,000 over the 12-month period, wherever you are. If you've got $100,000 or more in sales over the previous 12 months, you are liable for collecting and remitting Tennessee sales tax. So all sales taxable and exempt to individuals, businesses, exempt organizations, and any other purchasers should be included in this calculation. But sales to other dealers for resale can be excluded. So an example here, how to report sales by delivery destination and select the appropriate local tax on Schedule B and Schedule E of the sales tax return. We'll make a note here, software users should verify that the software is picking up the correct situs codes. A lot of businesses that this will affect, you probably use or could use tax software. It's still a good idea just to make sure that software is pulling the correct code. So an example here, if your local books here would report the addresses that each of your sales are shipped to. We've got some zip codes here, addresses, the amount of sales, and we'll see here on the next slide that just because something's in the same city doesn't necessarily mean that it's in the same situs code. For example, in Nashville, there's an address, Madison, Tennessee. Here you see it the second row down. That is a city that actually falls in 2 different counties, as do lots of jurisdictions within Tennessee and probably other places as well. But that's why situs is just very important. The situs is the unique code that is assigned to a particular address that lets our system know exactly where those funds get allocated to and need to go. And Christina, jump in, please, if you need to clarify or elaborate on any of the information as the subject matter expert here. And Christina actually and her team put together this presentation for us. So want to make sure I'm meeting all the points here.
I will. You're doing a great job. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Continued here, so in this example, gross sales for the month are 150,000. Again, I'm referring back to these sales right here. So in the example, gross sales for the month are 150,000. The taxable sales are all subject to the 7% state tax rate and then the applicable local sales tax rates. So there's a website here. It's tnmap.tn.gov/SST.html. And that is a website where you can go and identify situs codes using the exact address that the product was shipped or delivered to. If you're watching this on video, we'll have a PowerPoint posted as well. It's actually a PDF of this PowerPoint where links to these sites will be. So if taxpayers use a third-party sourcing software solutions, the software should automatically source the sales by situs. But again, as we mentioned, it's real important to confirm that the sales reports are generated using the appropriate level of detail to ensure that sales to the customers are treated correctly.
I will just chime in real quickly on the software issue. Software, just because you're using software doesn't mean it's actually calculating correctly. We've come across this quite a bit where if you're using certain software, tax software solutions, the sourcing goes right to the county, which it's not supposed to do. So that's why we're emphasizing to really check that situs code and just double check your system, make sure it's calculating correctly.
I can only imagine what these software, just what they're going through, keeping up with all the state laws over the past couple years. I'm sure that there might be something that they miss here and there, and good to double check.
And oftentimes it's just one button, one little, just checking off one little button in the software itself.
Wow, great. So definite important thing to note there is just to double check. All right, so here we've got the same set of sales that you saw a couple slides ago, but an extra column in here for situs code. Before inputting sales into the return, you just definitely want to identify the exact situs for each delivery address for your sales. All right, so using that sales report, enter an address into the local tax lookup tool. This was the website that I referred to just a moment ago that has this great little tool where you can just plug in the exact address, street, city, state, and zip, and click submit. Slide's not advancing. All right, so here's an example of what an address result would be, and this is for an incorporated jurisdiction. If you can zoom in on the PowerPoint here on this slide. It might be kind of hard for you to see, but the following result will appear based on the street address that was inputted into the lookup tool. And as you can see here, it provides a result of a city of Nashville, Davidson, and there's a situs of, my eyesight's really poor, situs for Nashville is 1901. But that's again, that's an incorporated jurisdiction. And that is the situs code based on that address that you would input into your schedule when you're filling out the sales tax return. So if it's an unincorporated address, here's an example. We've plugged in an address here, and the result, as you can see there under local, for city, it says unincorporated and gives the situs code of just 1900. So this is the last two examples, they're both in the same county in Tennessee, but one is within a jurisdiction that is incorporated and the other is not. So again, just a big, important, small detail there that even though they're both in Davidson County, they have different situs codes there. All right, this is an example of the same chart that we've used the last two examples here, but with the situs codes completed.
Right, and Katie, those first two rows are the examples that we walked through in the previous slides.
Right, so we've got Nashville and Madison, again, both that happen to fall within Davidson County with different situs codes there. And Christina, so that Madison, Tennessee address, if it fell, it's Sumner, right? That there's Madison also falls somewhere. Is that one that falls into another county?
Oh, yeah, there are several of them, like Johnson City, those types of areas.
Yeah, if the exact address was still within the city of Madison, but in a different county, it would again be a different situs code as well.
Exactly, you're exactly right.
Brentwood, Tennessee, I know falls within both Davidson County and Williamson County. So very important. You don't want to base it just on city there.
Yeah, this might be a good point, ladies, to also mention too. A lot of times people think zip code is so important. It's not that important. It's the entire address, and that's what that jurisdictional database is giving us. So that's just one point to make. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Thanks.
All right, so now that we have identified the situs codes, we are going to move into talking about completing the sales tax return through our 10-tap system using those situs codes. Just to FYI, if you're familiar with our 10-tap system and filing sales tax on 10-tap, great. We did do a webinar, one of these monthly webinars back in October on filling out the Tennessee sales tax return. You can view that in our webinar section. You go to tn.gov/revenue and then click on taxpayer education and webinars, and you'll see a webinar video library there where you can access all the different webinars that we've done, but specifically we did do a webinar on filing the sales tax return that you might find helpful if you did not attend that or have not checked that out yet. Just an overview here. So when you go in to fill out your return on 10-tap, again, which is required, electronic filing through 10-tap is required. The first question must be answered before you can even proceed. So it must be answered yes in order to report sales by destination delivery. The question says, are you ready to report sales by destination delivery? That is an option. That is the option that will be going away sometime very soon in 2022, where there will no longer be an option to choose yes or no there. Reporting based on delivery destination will be required, no option to say no there. Very important to note there. Let's see here. So clicking into the return, taxpayer should select the hyperlink to access Schedule E. So it'll be click here under report local sales by destination delivery. That's where you'll click to bring up Schedule E. And this is where you will enter in, choose the drop down for the specific situs code in the drop down box. In this case, the situs code is Nashville 1901. And then of course, enter in the sales.
That was our, if I could, that was our first address, like that top line that we looked up in the SST link on our website.
Right. The incorporated Nashville situs code of 1901. The sales there, just to real quickly go back, we are looking at that first line there, the sales for the first line to ship into 500 Dedrick Street in Nashville. We got sales of 10,000. Where were we? Right here. All right. So then you'll enter the state net taxable total of 10,000 and any adjustments. And enter the remaining situs codes. You can see, if you want to zoom in here, this is basically the internal chart that we had of all the sales and the situs codes. This is all of that data entered into the actual Schedule E on the Tennessee sales tax return. After all of it's entered, you click OK. And after sales have been sourced on Schedule E and the schedule is closed, a summary of computation of local sales and use tax is now populated on the Schedule B. So everything you're seeing here auto-populated as a result of the data that was entered into the Schedule E. And then, of course, there'll be a summary of the schedule that should match it should match all the totals that are on that Schedule E that you've got, basically. Spend a moment just to let you look at that and the way it would look.
Right, it'll have an error message when you're entering it into TinTap.
Right. Okay, so before we hop into chatting about some specific questions here, just some final things to note. Sales to customers in incorporated municipalities must be reported separately from sales to customers in unincorporated areas. In our example, we manually located a situs code for each customer. Again, third-party tax software providers often utilize sales tax rate tables in conjunction with the boundary database to locate situs codes for entire sales reports. And the tax rate tables, the boundary database, and a copy of the Streamlined Sales Tax Technology Guide is available on our website. It's very important to note here that sales shipped or delivered to an address within an incorporated municipality must be reported separately from those to the unincorporated area. I don't think we can stress that enough. We've mentioned it several times here. Hopefully that makes sense to you at this point. And again, that local lookup tool can take the guesswork out of that. If you use software, it should. Let's see here.
And Katie, can I just back
Sure.
up one second? Excuse me. Just high level, when you're reviewing your monthly or annual returns, when you're looking at the return, unless you're selling TPP or services to a rural area that's unincorporated, what you want to see is more cities or incorporated municipalities than counties. So high level, when you're looking at it, if you see that there are more counties than cities, then you know there might be an issue with the situs reporting.
That's kind of a red flag to you if you're seeing a lot of
Exactly.
counties, because for the most part, the majority of who you're going to be shipping to in this state is going to be an incorporated area.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. So here are some links. Again, once we have this PDF on our website, you'll be able to click into them directly, but the sales tax rate tables. There are several important notices that we mentioned here that touch on the laws that have been passed over the past few years. Important notice 1904, 1905, and then 2014. And of course, there will be a link to the database tool that we discussed, the situs tool, and then the last link there is completing the sales tax return. That's the webinar that I mentioned to you that we did in October with details about how to complete the Tennessee sales tax return. There's also some great information on completing the sales tax return, as well as details about this topic on our revenue help website, tn.gov/revenue on our website, and then you would click on revenue help. We have a ton of great articles about this. There are actually video tutorials too there of showing you how to fill out a sales tax return and lots of information. There's a whole section on out-of-state reporting as well. If you've got any questions that don't get answered today or about any other topics, or if you have any account specific questions, you can always email us at revenue.support@tn.gov. And as Billy mentioned, call us anytime Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30 Central at 615-253-0600. We have got about 20 or 30 minutes left and lots of questions to get through. So Billy, I'm going to hand things over to you. I'll keep this slide up. If y'all want me to reference back to some other ones, I can, but for now, I'll keep this one up for everyone and get to some of these questions that you all have.
Okay. Well, thanks a bunch, Katie. Thank you for going through all that material. I think that there's a lot to discuss here relative to some different transactional things. But one thing I'd like to point out too is sort of the why. In other words, why did Tennessee's legislature decide that it was very important to have businesses that are reporting that are subject to the threshold, the $100,000 threshold, to report by delivery destination? Because for years and years, they were able to report at the flat 2.25%. And of course, as Katie mentioned, we are in the process of getting that done away with, so to speak, to go exclusively to the delivery destination as prescribed by the law. Well, the legislature is very keyed in to the fact that Tennessee supports most of its economy by the collection of sales tax. Okay, about 60% of the money that the Department of Revenue collects is from sales tax collections. So a good portion of that money is local sales tax, and it's very important that we collect the correct rate because this money goes back to the communities out there, these different cities and counties, so that they can take that and use it for their governmental expenses. So accounting for this precisely allows them to maintain their budgets and to make sure that citizens are taken care of in their local communities. So that's the reasoning behind why this changed and why it is continuing to change and will finally completely change in 2022 to not using the flat 2.25% rate. So that's very important too. But Christina, I know that we've gotten some questions here too. I was hoping that maybe you could address a couple there that you have seen. So the one thing that we talked about in the presentation is about the local tax. Is it the same thing as the county tax? Do you want to comment on that a little bit about what that might mean?
Right. Well, the county and city tax are oftentimes the same, and sometimes they're not.
Mhm.
Right.
Right, right. It just depends on where that situs is located at, correct?
That is correct. Right.
Okay.
You can have a county that has 2 3/4, but you have other areas like Johnson City, I think, has 3 different areas, and you can have 2 1/4, 2 3/4, but sometimes they are the same, and that can add a layer of confusion.
Right, right. So I guess the lesson learned there is you can't make any assumptions based on what you're seeing. You see, oh, Johnson City, that rate is always blah. Well,
Right.
it's not really,
It's
because
not.
it could be different, right? And
Absolutely.
I know Goodlettsville is another example here in Middle Tennessee that's located in several other places as well. So in other counties rather. So the jurisdiction rates are different and all that.
Right.
But for the reasons we mentioned before, for the local governments wanting to collect
Right.
this money, we've got to put that money into their bucket, so to speak, properly, and
That's exactly
this
right.
aids us in doing that. Correct. Right, Tim.
Right.
So, Christina, what about people that deliver things into Tennessee, like they're selling something, say from Georgia, and they want to sell something into Tennessee, and they deliver it to here. Are they going to collect the Georgia tax or the Tennessee tax on that?
Tennessee tax.
And why
They're
is
going to
that?
collect it because they're shipping sales into Tennessee. They're delivering those sales TPP services into Tennessee, and you're taxed by delivery destination.
Okay, so they would want to make sure that they are including that on their Tennessee sales tax return based on where that product is delivered, correct?
Exactly. And they wouldn't report those sales on the Georgia return. I'm not sure about Georgia returns, but you're going to be reporting those on Tennessee and collecting Tennessee tax on those
Right.
if those sales are made to Tennessee.
Right. And on our Tennessee tax return, if you were, kind of flipping this around a little bit, um, for a business located in Tennessee that was selling to another state, that would be a sale in interstate commerce and would be exempt from our tax, but could very well be taxable in that other state in the same example that we were just using before, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Very good. Very good too. Um, Christina, do you have any other interesting things that you think would be helpful to the folks that are in the webinar today?
It's the situs. What I have found is a lot of our taxpayers struggle with getting the situs and getting it correct. And we're here to help. We can help you walk through it. I've done it several times helping people with their sales reports. Just take a look at them, and there are our resources on our website are really, really good. And if you struggle, like I said, call in and get some help. But it's the situs and getting the situs right on the returns and reporting
Right.
them on the Schedule E. I think that's the biggest struggle. In addition to that, it's that high level. When you're looking at the overall return, you want to see more cities or incorporated municipalities over those counties. And that to us is, we can tell that they're not being reported correctly as soon as we see that there are more counties and cities.
Right, right. So I think another thing to think about too is if you are going to have the requirement to know where these delivery destinations are, if you really go back and think about, if I was a business from outside the state, what's the very first thing I should do? And I think that really goes back to making very sure you have a complete and accurate delivery address on the invoice when you're
That's a really
actually
good
making
point.
the sale. Because if you don't do that, you're going to have a very difficult time. And as business goes, it seems like it would be sometimes hard to contact customers after the fact to try to nail some of this stuff down. Here you are trying to file a sales tax return and you're not able to complete it because you don't have good information. So getting that information up front to me would be very critical.
That's
Uh,
very true. And oftentimes, tax departments are separate from the accounting department. So the accounting may provide the tax department with limited information.
right.
Just to your point.
Yeah, and another thing too, and we talked about this when we did the sales tax return webinar several months back, is you can do your sales tax return in advance of the actual payment date. And of course, we know that the sales tax returns are due on the 20th of the month following the end of the tax period. Okay. But what you could do is you could start working on your tax return early in the month. Go ahead and save your data, save it as a draft on 10 tab. And then once you've completed all that information, then you can schedule your payment and the return to be filed on time, and that way you don't have to put everything together as of the 20th and you're having to hunt down addresses and things of that nature too. So that might be a good thing to do, is to kind of work on it a little bit earlier, particularly if you have a lot of sales. This time of year in December, maybe some of these retailers from outside Tennessee made some sales in Tennessee that they don't normally make because of the holiday season. So this might be a good time to kind of say, hey, you know what? Maybe I need to go ahead and work on this December return in early January so that I don't have to worry about getting it in on time by the 20th. So just points to ponder there, I guess you could say.
That's a great 10-tap feature.
Yes, it is. It really is. Being able to schedule that payment to come out and go ahead and completing all your information ahead of time is a wonderful thing. It really is. So I don't know. Do we have any other questions in chat? Anybody seeing anything?
I've got one here, Billy. A question from Melinda. Does this only apply to out-of-state vendors delivering into Tennessee? We're located in Tennessee, but may deliver to a jurisdiction with a different rate. Excuse me. Do we continue to collect based on our location or the location with the different rate within Tennessee?
Christina, you want to address that?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, I can answer it for you.
Oh yeah, good.
I'll jump in. The answer is you continue to collect at the rate where you're at, okay, regardless of where you deliver. So if you're a Tennessee-based business, you're going to be collecting at whatever local rate that you're at. So anything you send within Tennessee is considered to be a quote unquote over the counter sale. So you're going to collect at that rate. You're not required to do the destination sourcing if you're sending in state. Okay. So that makes it a little bit easier, quite honestly.
So this is for delivery destination by specific situs code is specifically for out-of-state companies delivering into Tennessee.
That is correct.
We have another question here from Randy. Have situs codes been in the Schedule E for the last 12 months? If not, when will they begin appearing? Is it, I believe my understanding on that is that if they chose to, that yes or no question when they start the return of if they want to report based on delivery destination, they would see those situs codes now and have been able to. But if you chose no, kind of opting out of that, so to speak, at that point, then they wouldn't have seen or wouldn't be seeing the situs codes. Is that right, Christina?
Yes,
that's correct.
Billy? Okay.
That's right. And what we would ask taxpayers to do, even if you'd met that threshold or whatever, if you're in that situation now, of course, it's asking you the question, are you ready to report this information by destination delivery, yes or no? If you're not, then you were allowed to do the 2.25% flat rate, okay? And you still are as of the time of this taping of this webinar. But that will change in 2022, and then we'll make that as a requirement too. So there's no reason to go back and try to go and figure out all that stuff on previously filed returns and things of that nature. What we want you to do is to consider doing this by delivery destination. Go ahead and get ready to do that if you haven't already done it, because it will be coming, and it will be very important that you're either using an appropriate software that does this for you, or that you're ready to look up all of the information using our tools that are available on our website.
Right, and to your point, Billy, it's probably good to get in the habit now before it all of a sudden you're not able to click that button anymore.
Right, correct. And of course, maybe one important thing to mention here too is that the law already states that this is the way we should be doing it. But I believe that our commissioner, if he were here with us today, would say that from a taxpayer friendly sort of terminology and trying to work with taxpayers, we understand there's transition, that it takes time to get people used to something that's new and that's why the department has allowed the optional availability of this for a number of months. But of course, time will come that we do need to go ahead and do what the law is prescribing us to do. And that's the reason for today's webinar and for us making the changes in 2022.
Right, Billy. So one of our participants, Maddie, just basically said unclear about are there sourcing rules changes coming? And really, like, just to reiterate what Billy just said, the rules and laws have not changed. We're just going to begin enforcing what was passed into law couple years ago, we will begin enforcing that in 2022. So
Right,
it's more of a
exactly.
procedural change to enforce the law rather than allowing out-of-state companies to opt out. So no new rules, just enforcement of the current rule is all that's changing.
Absolutely. Okay.
I don't see that we have any other questions that we haven't already addressed, that is, but again,
Okay.
if anyone has questions that you think about later or that we missed somehow, please feel free to email us at revenue.support@tn.gov or call us. We really appreciate you being on our monthly webinar and hope you join us for future webinars. We'll be posting the upcoming quarter's worth of webinars here real soon on our website. We just met a couple weeks ago to plan out the first half of 2022, and we've got some great webinars planned. Again, please check out our webinar library too. There's lots of great information. I was just looking, there was a question and Christina addressed it about which services are does sales tax in Tennessee apply to, and we did a whole webinar in the fall on services subject to sales tax in Tennessee. So if you're a more visual learner, these webinars are a great way. Wealth of information all throughout our website, the articles on revenue help, but I personally really like to listen to conversation and to see it visually. So hopefully you will check out our webinar website and join us the last Tuesday of next month for the 10-tap webinar. Christina, thank you so much for helping us put this together and then joining us today. Really appreciate it. It's great to have, we've gotten lots of feedback from participants of these webinars saying they love having an auditor as a subject matter expert on the webinars. I think.
And Christina, auditors are people too, correct? See, right there's a live person. You know,
she doesn't look so scary, right, y'all?
No, she's not scary at all. But we seriously, here at the Department of Revenue, we are very glad to help you. And Christina and Katie, myself and others that are on the call today, you know, we are here to be able to answer your phone calls at the phone numbers here, your emails, things of that nature. And we're glad that you are trying to comply with Tennessee's tax laws, and we appreciate that very, very much.
All right. Well, without further ado, we will go ahead and wrap this webinar up. And thanks to you all. Hope you have a great, happy new year. And we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Happy New Year.
Thanks.
Thank you.